Yes, sir. Hey, this is John Macaskill, and you're listening to The Spotlight on VeteranCrowd Network.
Welcome, everybody. This is Bob Loudon, your host, and I'm pleased to have as my guest today, John Macaskill. John and I met each other a few years ago when he was still on active duty down in the Virginia Beach area as a Navy SEAL, but he's recently retired. He's taken his young family and relocating to Colorado. He entered the Navy many years ago, enlisted, and then actually was fortunate enough to go to the U.S. Naval Academy. And we're going to be talking about his personal journey today. So, John, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bob. I appreciate it.
It's good to have you. I mean, I've been fascinated kind of following your little journey here. You've been sharing some things on Facebook and so forth since you've retired. You were certainly getting ready for that over the last year or so. But tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now. So you get a little bit of time off now, decompressing.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see. Today is Monday. I retired 2 Saturdays ago, technically. But prior to that, I was on terminal leave for about a month. And my wife and I, with our 2 little kids, I've got a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old little boy, are in an RV, and we're driving around the country for a little while before settling down in Colorado Springs. I wish the RV that's in the background was ours. That thing is a mega bus, but ours is actually in front of me on the other side of the screen, and it's quite a bit smaller than what you see behind me.
You shouldn't have disclosed that. We should have let everybody think that big behemoth was the one you're rocking.
I know, right? That thing is nice. But anyway, been touring around. We've visited Florida, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and now we're in Nevada for the birth of our little niece, who's due here in the next week to 10 days or so. And and then from here we'll be bouncing back to Colorado Springs, where we're closing on a house soon, and then we'll be calling Colorado Springs home for a while. And I'm working for a nonprofit called Veterans Path, which is a nonprofit that teaches veterans mindfulness and meditation. And we can get into that here in a little bit in the conversation. But we've just recently moved kind of headquarters from the San Francisco area to the Colorado Springs area. So it all worked out. I didn't plan moving to Colorado Springs based on Veterans Path. I planned on moving to Colorado Springs long time ago, and just so happened that Veterans Path was moving there as well. So it's like all the stars aligned. So we'll be calling Colorado Springs home very soon.
You're in enemy territory there, not far from the Air Force Academy. So let's go back. You enlisted in the Navy out of high school. So go back and tell us a little bit about 18-year-old John Macaskill here, and going into the Navy, and I do want to talk a little bit about going to the Naval Academy and your story there, and then the decision to become a Navy SEAL.
Sure. So I think I'll work a little bit backwards there. So the decision to become a Navy SEAL, I think, was the first decision, and then the path of how to get there was kind of defined as time went on. But in high school, I was a member of a fairly, I'll use the term elite loosely, but a fairly elite team of runners. We were really good, nationally ranked cross country and track. And I wanted to, when I left high school, join an organization that was very small, tight-knit and elite. And then I knew that I wanted to serve my country. So I started looking at all the different special operations units that were out there. And even though I grew up in Louisiana, I was still a water boy. I loved the water. I was a lifeguard all through high school. I was a fairly decent swimmer. So I decided upon the Navy, and their special operations or special warfare branch was the SEALs. So that's kind of what I started working towards in high school. And I originally applied to the Naval Academy out of high school and got turned down.
It's
don't
not
think my
easy to get into. I mean, it's a tough
yeah,
sport.
yeah, it is. It is. I don't know about as tough as BMI, but it's pretty
Ah,
tough. uh, but anyway,
well, we
got
could
turned
get
down
into a
initially.
discussion about that. I mean, they had to give you the education to make you go there, whereas ours was worth paying for. So I'll give
Touche, touche.
you.
So anyhow, got turned down and was like, okay, well, I know that I wanted to go into the Navy. There's other routes, but I think I'm going to enlist because that's going to be the fastest route into the SEAL teams. So I enlisted, became a parachute rigger, served down in Pensacola, Florida for a while. Not terribly long, just long enough to figure out
Where
what a parachute rigger
Floribama
did.
was.
And where
Yeah.
Floribama was, yeah, exactly. and then got picked up from the enlisted ranks to go into the Naval Academy, luckily enough. So went straight from the enlisted ranks the following year into the Naval Academy, did my 4 years there, majored in mathematics, and then graduated in 2001 and went out from the academy in Annapolis to Coronado, California for SEAL training. And then after
So you were
SEAL
in buds
training,
at 9/11, huh?
I sure was.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I remember that like it was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
We were in the chow hall early in the morning because it was West Coast, and we saw the news, and we thought that it had been an accident. When we saw the first plane hit, just like everyone else, and then saw the second plane hit, that's when we knew we were in trouble. Then the Pentagon got hit, and we knew that our life was going to
Yeah.
change, not just as a nation, but specifically as special operators or future special operators. Back then, we were just little tadpoles going through training.
Mm.
So yeah, then from buds, went through SEAL qualification training, just like all the other SEALs do out there in Coronado, and then went out to my first SEAL team out on the East Coast in Virginia. And for the most part, that's where most of my military career was there in Virginia. I did one stint back on the West Coast in San Diego, did some time at the Naval Postgraduate School,
Mm.
and then went down to Tampa. I think that's kind of like a rite of passage for almost all SEAL officers, is that they do some time in Tampa
Right.
at either SOCOM or CENTCOM or SOCCENT, one of the different commands that's down there in Tampa. It's kind of the epicenter of special operations, and then came back to the East Coast where I served the rest of my time.
Well, congratulations on your retirement. Like all Navy SEALs that I've met, you've got an entrepreneurial flair to you. You've been involved in the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum down in the Hampton Roads area, Elite
Right.
Meet, Honor Foundation, Scrum, Mission 60, all of this stuff going on as, one side hustle after another. But I want to talk about mindfulness and meditation. And this is kind of fascinating stuff. Years ago, I got exposed in a weekend seminar to Aikido, and we did all
Oh
this
yeah.
breathing and stuff like this. And so I know it works, but I haven't really gone down, and gotten it into a science. So tell me about the path, the journey that you're on, and, how this thing is playing out. And then I want to talk about mindfulness and meditation. I want to learn something. Right.
Sure.
Right.
So yeah, actually funny you should mention Aikido. Our executive director, Dave Drake, he had a nonprofit years ago called Aikido for Veterans and families, because of the mental health benefits that come from the somatics of Aikido. And there's a lot of similarities between Aikido and mindfulness. I mean, basically, practicing Aikido is a form of practicing mindfulness. But yeah, I'll back up. So my journey to mindfulness has kind of been a long journey and drawn out, but I'll try to summarize it in just a few minutes. So my first deployment as a SEAL was a pretty tough one. We ended up losing quite a large number of guys on that deployment. It was the deployment you may have seen or read about in the movie or the book Lone Survivor, where Marcus Luttrell was the lone survivor, and we ended up losing 3 other SEALs on the ground and 8 other SEALs in a helicopter, along with 8 Army Night Stalkers, for a total of 19 people lost on that one day in 2005, June 28th, 2005. So that was my first deployment, and I knew all those guys, or at least all the SEALs. I didn't know all the Army Night Stalkers, but I knew all the SEALs. I knew most of their families, and that weighed heavily on me, both for their loss, and then also, why did I survive? Why was I not one of them? I was actually not on that operation. I was supposed to be, then I was taken off, and it kind of went back and forth. And, as time and things would have it, is I ended up not being on that operation. And so I ended up having quite a bit of survivor's guilt that I carried with me over time. And that led to stress, led to anxiety, led to depression. And the Navy had me on various medications to address that. And those work to a point, and I think they still have a place, they have a time, they have a purpose. But honestly, I think that for me, I felt less of myself than when I had been off of them. So I kind of felt like an empty shell of who I used to be. And then I started getting some talk counseling, and again, that helped a little bit. But I don't think I truly knew what needed to be addressed. I just knew that there was depression, I knew that there was anxiety, I knew that there was stress. And finally, I talked to a counselor, a Navy psychologist, who recommended mindfulness and meditation. And funny enough, I kind of laughed at him at first, because when you hear meditation, a lot of people in their minds, they kind of think that that's kind of flowery and touchy-feely, and they don't think that it's something that a Navy SEAL can practice. So I laughed at him and didn't do it for a while, and then he continued to push it, and eventually I was like, okay, doc, I'll try it out. So I tried it out, and 2 weeks later I went back to him, and it's like, hey doc, it's not working out for me. What else you got?
It's like going to the gym and expecting
yeah
you know.
Yeah, exactly. I may have lost. Oh, thanks.
I got you. You're back.
Sorry, I had a call coming in. So, sorry. Yeah. So exactly, it's like going to the gym for a couple of weeks and then expecting to come out looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I went back, practiced for a couple of months this time, and at that point, that's when I started to see and feel the differences, long-term differences. I was communicating better with my family. I was focused more at work. I was able to see what needed to be addressed, so that what was causing the depression, what was causing the anxiety, now I knew what it was, and that I could talk through. I really thought at one point that I was, fine, that this was just some chemical imbalance that needed to be addressed. But really, there was something in my mind that I hadn't addressed. There was something in my heart that I hadn't addressed. And it was the whole operation that I mentioned before. Now that I knew that's what it was that was causing it, now I could address it with the talk counselors, and I did that, and I started to feel better there as well. So this all was happening somewhere around the same time as I was starting to think about getting out of the military and what it was that I wanted to do. One of my old mentors, I don't know if you've met him, Bob, but Matt Stevens, former retired SEAL as well. He sat me down and he's like, John, you need to start figuring out what it is that you want to do. And started getting into the entrepreneurial side of things, started looking at all the bright and shiny objects that are out there when you get out of the military. And I started looking at personal finance, financial management, private equity, venture capital, commercial real estate, all these different things. And I think those are all great jobs, but nothing really hit home with me as far as what was that I was passionate about.
Right.
So eventually the light bulb went off over my head. And I was like, well, I'm learning more about this mindfulness and meditation. I'm very passionate about it. It's helping me out. Why can't I teach other veterans this stuff? So I thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to found a nonprofit that does this. And luckily, I didn't have to found one. One was already out there. So Veterans Path, it was founded in 2008 by two women out in Berkeley, California. And I was introduced to it,
Were
and
they
they brought
veterans?
me on.
How was,
They're not. No, as a matter of fact, in the Vietnam era, they had marched against the war.
I got
And
it.
and now that
Well, they're in the
they
right
realize
place for that too, being in Berkeley,
in
right?
Berkeley, right, exactly. But they realized that, hey, being anti-war doesn't mean you have to be anti-military. And these veterans or military members are coming back from combat, and they're experiencing post-traumatic stress, they're experiencing
Right.
depression, there's a high level of suicide. We can do something to address that. So they founded Veterans Path. At the time, it was called Honoring the Path of the Warrior. And they've since then helped many veterans by introducing them to the life-changing and, quite frankly, I believe, life-saving practices of mindfulness and meditation. So that's a very long-winded way of getting to how I got involved with Veterans Path and what it is that we're doing now.
Let me
I'll get a little
unpack a
further.
couple of things here.
Sure.
So first, we know this. It takes 60 days or so to create a new habit. So anybody that's trying this needs to stick it out. But there's
Yeah.
some things that you say. I mean, literally, there are physiological changes to the brain that take place.
Right.
When you get into meditation and mindfulness. So talk about how literally your brain is it rewiring itself?
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, physiologically, you're rewiring your brain. So the part of our brain that is responsible for fight or flight, it's a small little almond-sized part of our brain called the amygdala. And you may have heard about the amygdala hijacking, where sometimes people will come to you with a task or a deadline, and you instantly get this spike of adrenaline into your body, and you start stressing out, even if it's a small little task. Well, that's because your amygdala is reacting rather than the way you should be responding is with the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's responsible for cognitive thought. And really the way that we were wired before was for survival. So
Right.
in ancient times, we needed that amygdala to react the way that it does.
100,000 years of evolution. Yeah, tiger,
Yeah,
run.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So you see the saber-toothed tiger, you should be running away. Now we get somebody that brings us a task, and we react that same way with that survival mechanism, which really isn't necessary. So our bodies and minds have not evolved as fast as society and the world has. So we're still reacting with these ancient minds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the rewiring happens when you practice meditation. As you meditate or as you practice mindfulness, your mind starts to wander off, and you start thinking about your task list or your to-do list or whatever it is that's stressing you out through the day. And that's kind of we call it your monkey mind, because your mind bounces around kind of like a monkey through all these different things. Well, as you start to notice that it's bouncing around, and you bring it back to the meditation, whether you're bringing it back to your breath, whether you're bringing it back to another bodily sensation, or whether you're bringing it back to a mantra that you may be using, that very act of coming back and coming back and coming back, that physiologically rewires your brain to start thickening the lining of the prefrontal cortex, so that you use that more often than the amygdala. And the amygdala can actually physiologically shrink. You still want that amygdala there to have that fight or flight, just in case you are in a car accident or a bike accident, like I know we're going to get
Yeah.
into here shortly. But you still want to be able to react with that. But that's not what you want to be your natural reaction mechanism for everything that you have every day. So again, the
Now let
meditation
me
and mindfulness.
let me interrupt
Sure.
for 1 second right there. I mean,
Sure.
one of the qualities of veterans is, or at least we'd like to think, we're calm in stressful situations. So how does the military sort of train that skill And is there a difference between that and what you're talking about?
Yes. Great question, Bob. So there's a couple of things. One, the military tries to inoculate you to stress by putting you through boot camp, by putting you through, crucibles, by putting you through different stress inoculation trials. Boot camp, the Naval Academy, VMI, Citadel, we all have whatever it's called that puts you through that very high stress situation. And that, in a way, does help to get you used to being uncomfortable, get you used to thinking through stressful situations. But ultimately, I think it causes you to rely more on the amygdala than that prefrontal cortex.
Interesting. So it's not developing the same piece of your brain that you were talking about.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Now the military is starting to catch on. Special operations, the Navy, the Army. I don't know what the Air Force and the Marine Corps are doing, or the Coast Guard, but I know that the Army, Special Operations, and the Navy all have a version of the same thing where they're teaching mindfulness and meditation to their service members. The Navy has the Navy Warrior Toughness program, which incidentally was also developed by a Navy SEAL, a Navy psychologist, and a Navy chaplain. And that kind of sounds like a joke where you have the Navy SEAL, a Navy chaplain, and a Navy psychologist walk into a bar. Right. Yeah, but they developed this program at boot camp, and it does have an aspect of mindfulness to it, because when a couple of years ago we had these Navy ships that were running aground or colliding with other ships. Mm-hmm. Well, what they found was that the crew, some of them were reacting positively and doing what they needed to do, but some of the other ones were just freezing, and they weren't able to react or rather respond with their prefrontal cortex. They were just freezing. And so they developed this Navy Toughness program to help to develop resiliency and grit for the Navy members. So the military is starting to catch on. It is something that I believe is imperative to make our warriors smarter and better on the battlefield. Not necessarily better killers, if you will, but better warriors. So they may make better decisions on the battlefield. They may not shoot when they shouldn't shoot. They may see a threat where before they would have shot. Now they can de-escalate it and bring it down to where it needs to be. There's a great podcast, or rather interview, with Amishi Jha, who's a brain scientist and a neuroscientist, and then General I'm forgetting his name right now. Pyatt, General Pyatt, Walt Pyatt. They talk about that very thing, where General Walt Pyatt was training his troops in mindfulness, and they were deployed, and in a situation where they could have shot, they decided not to, and they de-escalated the situation, and actually ended up saving lives, both on our side and the other side, because they didn't escalate it to where it didn't need to be. So anyway, the military is catching on in that we are making our warriors more resilient, developing their grit, and developing their ability to respond rather than react. And on the other side of that, this is where Veterans Path is really starting to focus our efforts, is on the transition from the military. Transition from the military, as you well know, is a stressful time.
Has this been stressful for you? I mean, you seem like you're rocking it, but I don't know. Maybe it has been.
I think it's stressful in different ways. I mean, right now living in an RV with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old and a puppy that's sitting right here next to me. I think I may have bitten off more than I can chew at times, but luckily I have the tools that I'm referencing, so I'm able to get through these. But that's the thing, is transition is stressful. Trying to find a job, trying to find your new tribe, trying to find your new purpose,
adjusting to the culture.
Yeah, exactly. Adjusting to a new culture. So the mindfulness can come into play there, in that, you can do that deep introspective work and find out what it is you need to do to feel happy, find out what it is you need to do to find your new purpose, your new tribe. Sorry if you can hear this other RV driving by as I'm sitting here. Hopefully it's not too distracting. But yeah,
not bad.
That's what Veterans Path is doing now. Is we're working with veterans who have already hung up the uniform, but we're also starting to work with transitioning service members as they start to look towards that exit ramp. And we're giving them these same tools that I've recently used in my own transition.
So let's back up. So I'm a veteran, long since out, right? But I mean, how does one engage with Veterans Path? How do I know I need it?
Right.
What questions do I need to be asking, or what things do I need to recognize in my friends and say, hey, maybe this is something for you to check out?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think everybody needs it. I mean, honestly, I mean, obviously, rather
100% market. Okay.
Yeah. So what do we have? 200,000 or so transitioning service members every year.
Right.
Our vision at Veterans Path is that this becomes part of the transition program, the actual part of the transition assistance program in some form or fashion, so that every transitioning service member gets it, because you really can't find your new true north if you don't know who you are. If you're going after, again, like I was, those shiny objects that some people talk about as they transition out of the military, which again, those are great jobs, and maybe that is what you want to go after. But if you don't settle your mind, I mean, the way that I kind of picture it is your mind as you're starting to transition is like a snow globe, and you're shaking it up and all these flakes are flying around. Well, you need to settle it down, let that snow globe sit for a second, let all those snowflakes settle, to know who you are, know what it is you want to do, know what it is that you want to do for your family, for your long-term job. And if you don't allow yourself the time and space to do that deep introspective work, then you're not going to know what it is you want to do. And you may go after a bright and shiny object that ends up leading you down the wrong path.
Right.
So we think that it's imperative for everyone. 100% market, yes. How you find out about it, we've got our website, veteranspath.org, and then I'm manage the social media side of things. So I try to push as much as I can on social media about Veterans Path. We've actually got an online mindfulness program kicking off next week and again next month for both veterans and service members, active service members, because we want to prove to the VA that this is an effective method to introduce mindfulness to veterans, and that it's not only an effective method, but it's effective in helping veterans settle their minds.
How many folks are working on it now, and how do you finance this? You, as a non-for-profit, you've got sponsors, or how does that work?
So yeah, we are 100% nonprofit. We are both through donations and fundraising. It's not a whole lot of people. We've got about 8 people who are either contractors or full-time employees, 2 full-time employees and about 6 or 7 contractors. And then we've got the board of directors. But yeah, it's fully funded through donations and fundraising. And then we've partnered with an organization called eMindful. They allow us to bring the online aspect to it, because we started, when I mentioned the 2 women that founded it, we were doing face-to-face retreats, teaching people in person these same skills of mindfulness and meditation.
With COVID, right?
Exactly. So we were planning on starting some online stuff as well, but COVID kind of accelerated that timeline. So that's right now, that's all we're doing is online, and hoping to get back to some face-to-face stuff soon. But yeah, that's all we're doing is online with that crew of 8 people or so.
Yeah, it is interesting stuff. I had immediately previous to this podcast, I interviewed a guy named Nick Black. Nick's in Charleston, South Carolina, and he'd been in the 173rd Airborne Brigade as a Ranger, and he's got an organization called Stop Soldier Suicide, and a lot of there's probably a lot of overlap, right? People dealing with mental illness and that sort of thing. So
for sure,
it's kind of a theme here. So how are you taking care of yourself? How are you doing now? Right, with all this mindfulness stuff, and how do I get started? Right, I've done a little bit of meditation, but how does a person kind of jump into the water here? Me.
Sure.
Sure. Say, Bob, here's how you do it.
So, I'll answer your first question first. How am I doing? I think I'm doing okay. There's definitely days that are better than others, but the days that are better than others, ironically, are the days that I do practice. The days that I practice meditation, the days that I practice my breathing.
Were you practicing the day you had the mountain bike wreck?
I believe I was. Yeah.
You must have banged yourself up pretty good. For our listeners out there, there were some photographs of your back, and it looked like you had hit it pretty hard.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure how I walked away from that. My wife was right in front of me. We were going down downhill track in Telluride, Colorado. They've got some amazing downhill tracks there. Anyway, I hit this one jump that went straight into a turn, and I hit the jump. Didn't make the turn.
Can't turn in the air, right?
Yeah, didn't make the turn. Flew off the track into a tree. And luckily I didn't hit the tree head on, but I flew over the handlebars, past the tree, and went down the mountain a little ways.
You need to get like some lacrosse body armor or something.
Yeah. Well, some of the kids did. Some of the kids had that stuff on, and there were two younger kids behind me. I mean, I'm 43, so when I say younger kids, these, I don't know, probably early 20s.
Don't you hate it when they ride up and go, "Are you okay?"
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. They rode up and they're like, "Dude, are you okay?" And then even further down the mountain. So I got up and walked away. I was like, wow, no broken bones, nothing, just some bumps and bruises. Rode back down the hill, and at the bottom of the hill, they were there waiting. They're like, "Hey man, are you okay for real? Because that looked terrible." I was like, "Yeah, it looked a lot worse than it was."
How did it feel the next day? That's
right. That's where it hurt. But yeah.
So how do I get started? And I'm going to skip the mountain biking. I know I'm too old for
that. So yeah, I mean, I started very simply. I downloaded an app just called Insight Timer. Very basic app, and there's a paid version and there's a free version. I know some people who accidentally sign up for the paid version. You do not have to use the paid version. It's a free. There's thousands of meditations on there, but I started very simply, just with some of the shorter meditations. The meditations, range from literally like 2 minutes to hours long, but I try to do 15 minutes or so. I started again very short because as you start, your mind wanders all over the place. But as you practice more and more, you'll find that happening less and less because your brain is rewiring itself. But I started.
Is there breathing that goes along with this too? I mean, is that coached in the process?
There can be. There's different types of meditation. So mindfulness meditation quite often focuses on the breath as your anchor. So you start really focusing on the breath, start focusing on how you're breathing, the belly breathing, kind of a deep breath in. And then what I try to do is I try to double however much time I take to breathe in, I double that breathing out. That helps you to tap into the parasympathetic nervous system and really slow things down.
Now you're starting to sound like Bob Pizzini. Bob, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. iFly.
I didn't know what parasympathetic was until I sat through and participated in one of his seminars.
Yeah, I need to have Bob on our podcast, the Veterans Path podcast. So anyway, you tap into the parasympathetic nervous system, slow things down. It slows your respiratory rate, slows your heart rate, brings your blood pressure down. And that's a great way to do it. But there's other meditations that are on there, and whatever works for you. That has worked for me. That's I still use that fairly regularly. Sometimes I do my own meditations without any guidance, but sometimes I just don't feel like doing the work of doing my own meditation, and just having somebody else guide me through it is helpful. So I use Insight Timer, but there are other ones that are out there. I mean, hundreds of different apps, thousands of different meditations. That's the great way to start.
In Veterans Path, do you facilitate people getting together with one another, and if so, is that done like locally, or is it done electronically?
Yeah, so I think we touched on it just briefly before COVID. We were getting together primarily in the California area. We were starting to get some things going in Colorado Springs, and we were starting to get some things going in Virginia.
Would that be like part of a group or something? Would you like assemble a small group that would be battle buddies?
Yeah, exactly. So we call them peer support specialists, where we have people who have gone through our programs before, and they kind of become a sponsor for those who are new to the program, and kind of be, battle buddies, like you said. Yeah. So yeah, we are, the long-term vision is to get that back up and running, and not only get that back up and running, but actually have a certification process for those veteran leaders that have gone through the program before, to where they kind of have they are the nucleus of that cell in their area around the country, and eventually get it to where it's nationwide, not just in Colorado, not just in California, not just in Virginia, but wherever there are veterans that need these services, need these practices, which is just about everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I'm going to give a shout out now just to Todd Baldwin at Red Leg Brewing there in Colorado Springs. You got to be part of the welcoming committee to have John Macaskill and his young family come into town. And
definitely,
like I say, Todd was a guest on our program, and they're building that thing right there at the Garden of the Gods. With I think you're probably going to like it. A lot of biking trails and stuff like that through there. So I got to hook you guys up, and then got some other ideas for some other people that I'd want to connect. Hey, John, we're kind of at the end of our window here, but I really appreciate you sharing the story, your personal journey. And boy, there's a lot of other stuff we could have unpacked, but time goes by quick, doesn't it?
Next time.
We'll get you back on another episode. We'll come back, and we'll do the before and after Colorado Springs.
That sounds good.
I think you need to sneak over. You need to sneak over to the Air Force Academy and do a little, a little bit of a raid for Navy football or something. A little recon. Right. So thank you so much. Well,
Bob, it's been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm jealous, actually, what you're getting to do, man. I tell you, I hope you have a great time. So this has been The Spotlight. Our guest has been John Macaskill, retired Navy SEAL, and with Veterans Path, and we'll be putting links to ways to reach John, multiple ways, social media, websites, and so forth, so that all of that information will be available in our show notes. The Spotlight airs twice a week. I'm trying to do Tuesdays and Fridays, and we bring in veterans and military spouses that are making an impact in our community. You can learn more about us at VeteranCrowdNetwork.com, and I'd love to have you subscribe and follow us and give us a rating out there on Spotify or Google or Apple. I'd love to hear what you think about how we can make this podcast better. Again, John, thanks for being my guest, and that's a wrap.
Thank you, brother.